something, isn't it? Many of you are business leaders. Many of you own your own private companies, your own businesses. You've succeeded accordingly, and I would argue that you've done so because you know how to sell things, you know how to make things, you know how to produce things, you know how to market things. Well, education is in the same type of endeavor, isn't it? Education is in the business of ideas. Ideas matter. Richard Weaver told us in 1947 in his seminal work, ideas have consequences, that ideas have consequences. They bear fruit. They never lie fallow. Every idea will bear either good fruit or bad fruit. Good ideas lead to good places and good things and good culture and good church and good corporations and good country. Bad ideas lead the opposite direction. Ideas matter. They always are directional. They lead somewhere. So education is in the business of ideas. And as I talk to you today about Common Core, I'm going to do that within the context of what I believe good ideas are, and that education should always be in the business of promoting good ideas. Education cannot claim to be successful just by perpetuating those things that are common, those things that are average, those things that are acceptable. In fact, I deviate from script here a little bit, but seeing as I'm treating you as a class, did you know that as conservatives, I'm assuming most everybody in here would identify themselves as a conservative. Did you know that really you're classical liberals? Did you know that? You see, Oxford and Cambridge arguably would be the cradle of the liberal arts academy. And why did they use that language? Why was Oxford defined as a liberal arts institution? It's because it was created to educate a free man, a free woman, a free culture, a free people. You see, a liberal arts academy was for liberation and liberty and freedom. That's what a liberal arts institution was founded to do. The classical definition of liberal is the same definition as liberty and liberation. And I wrote a book a couple years ago. It's titled, Why I'm a Liberal and Other Conservative Ideas. Why I'm a liberal and other conservative ideas. In fact, right here, I have it. I'm going to read an excerpt or two from it. But my point is this. If you want to be free, if you want to enjoy liberty, if you want to be liberated, then you embrace the classical liberal arts model because you recognize that good ideas will lead to freedom and bad ideas will lead the opposite direction. I'm fond of telling my students at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, I don't care what your opinion is. I don't care. You did not come to my institution to get an opinion. I'm not going to celebrate when you graduate 4 years after enrolling as a freshman, when you walk across the stage in your funny cap and gown, and I stand there in mine and I hand you a diploma. I'm not going to slap you on the back and celebrate and say, congratulations, you got a degree in opinions. I'm not going to do that. That would be absurd, wouldn't it? To congratulate you on an opinion after you've had 4 years of study and 4 years of quizzes and 4 years of tests and 4 years of memorization and 4 years of eating lousy cafeteria food. Am I going to congratulate you and say you've got an opinion? I would think that you would be offended by that and you would suggest that maybe you wasted your money. You see, I hope that you've learned something, that you've learned and acquired and grabbed a hold of and pursued some measure of truth above and beyond what you had when you started. And I've had a few people suggest to me when I give that talk on, I don't care what your opinion is, they've turned around and they've said, well, that's just your opinion on what education is. And my answer to you, if that's where you're tempted to go, is this. If you're an engineer and you're designing airplanes on the basis of your opinion, would you tell me which one it is? Because it won't fly. You're not going to get in it, nor will I, because it won't work. And if you're in the medical industry, if you're a doctor or a nurse, for example, and you're going to administer medication on the basis of your opinion, please stay away from me. You're dangerous. You don't know what you're doing. You see, opinions always lead to bad places. Pol Pot had an opinion. Mao had an opinion. Robespierre had an opinion. Stalin and Chavez and Mussolini had opinions. Hitler had opinions. Opinions always lead to bondage and slavery. But Jesus told us the truth shall set you free. Liberty, liberation. So if you want to be free, if you want to enjoy liberty, if you want to be liberated from the consequences of your sin and the consequences and bondage that comes from someone else's sin, then surely you should care about education. You should care about ideas, and you should care about perpetuating the best ideas for the future, for your culture, so that the next generation can wave the banner proudly and boldly, and that your kids and grandkids will enjoy that freedom. So, I'm going to share with you a little bit this morning about why I'm against Common Core. Now, I'm going to admit something before I get into some prepared remarks here. I'm late to the party. I had some folks from Oklahoma who were anti-Common Core come to my office about a year and a half ago, and they asked me to support them. I was gracious, I was polite, but I frankly ignored them. I didn't have time. I didn't want to get into this. I considered it an intramural debate. I noticed that there were Democrats and Republicans on both sides of the fence. I have a college to run, I have an institution to run, and I didn't want to get into this issue. Now that sounds rather ironic and maybe even irresponsible based on what I just told you about the fact that I cherish ideas and that I consider it my obligation to champion the best ideas. Well, a few months later, it finally dawned on me. I have to get involved in this because we're talking about the educational paradigm that's going to bring students to my university. And what is the best paradigm to prepare them to be lifelong learners? So I started researching Common Core, and it started bothering me more and more. Because I believe in academic freedom, and I believe in liberty, and I believe in liberation, and I would fancy myself as a classical liberal, and it started bothering me that the academic establishment was being controlled by something called commonality. It bothered me. I started asking myself questions. Why in the world would somebody who believes in academic freedom, even if they're on the left or even if they're progressive, why would they want to sign over the authority of their classroom, the authority of their curriculum, and the authority of their standards to somebody else? And why in the world would they sign such authority over to somebody else that they don't even know? Often some distant state, San Francisco or New York, for example, that's going to craft a curriculum and call it common to all of the schools across the land and say, this is the way you're supposed to teach, and these are the goals you're supposed to attain, and these are the standards we want you to all hold in common. Now, why would I as an academic want to give over my classroom to that? Even if I were left of center, wouldn't I want the authority to do what is best in my classroom? To challenge the common idea, to be uncommon, to be unpopular, to look for the thing that is unusual, to challenge commonality rather than to go with the flow. Why would I as an academic want to succumb to Common Core? You see, as Anne said to you, education for me was a starting point. It woke me up. It helped me realize as a blue-collar kid that there was more to life. There was more to life than living in commonality, if you will, within a blue-collar community in southern Michigan. That there was a way up and out, and that those superior ideas would liberate me and give me more opportunities. More doors open, if you will. That God could use me in greater ways if I would accept the uncommon. His ideas, rather than man's. And along the way, I figured out that the Liberal Arts Academy, sidebar, when I enrolled at a liberal arts institution as a conservative kid out of a blue-collar family in Hillsdale, Michigan, I didn't have a clue what liberal arts was, and I thought I was really in for some strange ride by being educated in a liberal arts institution. But I quickly realized that the liberal arts institution was a freeing environment. It was one that allowed me to trust God's truth rather than elevating myself, as the original sin does so often, to be as God and think I was smarter than Him. It allowed me to have freedom within God's ways rather than being held in bondage to my own. Sidebar, did you know that G.K. Chesterton has often, he's a master of paradox, he once told us that if you want to have liberty, you have to have law. If you want to have freedom, you have to have fences. He recognized the paradox of discipline and freedom. He once painted this picture. He said, if you wanted to create the best playground in the world, in this community, and you constructed all the best toys and all the best ballparks, and you wanted your kids to go out onto that playground and enjoy it and be free to enjoy that playground. What did he tell you to do? He said, build a fence. He said, if you don't, what will happen? Your kids will probably run out into the road and get killed. They will have no freedom. I've got a story that I tell to my students back home. I call it the lesson of Blue. You see, the lesson of Blue is a story about my black Labrador named Blue. See, I thought Lobo's 1972 song, Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, Traveling and Living Off the Land, Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, How I Love Being a Free Man. I thought Lobo was saying Blue, not Boo, so I named my black dog Blue. It's confusing, don't get... but nonetheless, I've learned a lesson by watching my dog Blue. And it's the lesson of this paradox between discipline and freedom. You see, if you've got a dog, you know this, or any other animal. If they have learned to obey the master's voice, if they listen to you, and if they honor your boundaries, what can you do? You can let them off their leash. You can let them play. They can roam your property without any fear of being disciplined because they've honored boundaries beyond their own definition. They've listened to the master. But if your dog is disobedient and you have not trained them accordingly, and you love your dog and you don't want your dog to get hurt, you put them in a pen or you keep them on a leash. They have no freedom. Again, with greater discipline, you get greater freedom. With clear definition of law, you get liberty. When you build fences, you are free. That's the lesson of Blue, and it's the lesson of G.K. Chesterton. Those are good ideas. That's the definition of true liberty. So if we are going to pass on that type of culture to our next generation, then we have to define those ideas. And that's what's wrong with Common Core, in my view. You see, I'm against Common Core because I believe in academic freedom. Freedom to pursue the uncommon, the exceptional, the unpopular, and freedom to not be constrained by the consensus or the crowd. I'm against Common Core because I believe in intellectual integrity, the integration of head and heart, and fact and faith, and belief and behavior, that is directed by the student's thirst for truth rather than the state's hunger for control. I'm against Common Core because I believe in the liberal arts and liberty and liberation, a free mind and a free man rather than one held in bondage to politics and power and what is popular or what is common. I'm against Common Core because I believe in the humility of the student rather than the arrogance of the state. I'm against Common Core because I am tired. I'm so very tired of the politically correct and boringly predictable ad hominem attacks on people such as me who dare to raise their hand and question those things that are being defined by others as common. I'm against Common Core because of the intellectual mediocrity that has already resulted in many of its proponents not understanding a whit of Socratic logic that's used to make the points that I'm making right now. I'm against Common Core because as an educator, I recognize that when we exchange the truth of God for a lie, that we build a house of cards that will fall to mankind's inevitable temper tantrum of seeking control and power. Like I said, history tells us time and time again that to deny what is right and true and to embrace what's wrong and false is to fall prey to the rule of the gang or the tyranny of one. I'll say that again, the rule of the gang or the tyranny of one. Go read David Horowitz's intellectual autobiography. It's titled Left Illusions. Now, many of you probably know that Horowitz back in the 60s was radical left. He was actually the editor for the Black Panthers. Did you know that? Horowitz converted, if you will, from radical left to conservative. Why? If you've read the book, you've heard the story of Betty, his friend. See, he had a friend who was an accountant. She was a bookkeeper and she needed a job. He got her a job working for the Black Panthers, keeping the books. And one day Betty discovered some improprieties in the accounting of the Black Panthers. Somebody was skimming off the top. So Betty confronted it. She blew the whistle. And the next thing that David Horowitz found was that Betty was murdered. She was dead. Now David knew what happened. He knew the leadership of the Black Panthers was responsible for it. But at that point in time, he says he realized that his ideas, the direction of his ideas, embracing the wrong ideas, led to the ultimate form of slavery for another human being, and that was her death. And he said, I realized I killed Betty by my ideas. And he converted, if you will, to a conservative worldview. And he said that he realized at that moment that his worldview, his old worldview, was the rule of the gang. Because there was nothing left to control society other than the gang rising up and deciding that they could do what they wanted to do for their own perpetuation and their own power. That's the story of David Horowitz's conversion. So here's my question to you. Does subscribing to a common core of accepted ideas constructed by some faceless group of bureaucrats behind some closed door off in some unknown location make you feel more or less free? Do we really have more intellectual liberty at the end of the day, or are we becoming more and more enslaved by the constructs of what the Germans called the Übermensch, the supermen, those power brokers or elites, those fittest who have survived in the political arenas of campaigns or campuses? Are we free to live today and to think and to believe within the boundaries and the beauty of the classical liberal arts, or are we becoming more and more bound by groupthink and political correctness and the commonality of what is popular? I'm against Common Core because as a classical liberal, I am confident in my conservatism. I am driven by a hunger for answers rather than the protection of opinions. The hunger for answers rather than the protection of opinions. And I want an education that is not subject to the ebb and flow of someone else's personal agenda or political fad. I'm against Common Core because I believe in freedom. Freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And freedom to dissent from what someone else says is common. I'm against Common Core because I'm energized by the unapologetic pursuit of truth. I trust it. I will follow it. I know that if we embrace truth with a capital T because it's endowed to us by our Creator, that it will ultimately set me free. And it will set you free, and it will set your kids free. Common Core needs to be challenged. I don't care who comes up with the curriculum. Somebody needs to be able to raise their hand and say, excuse me, I disagree, and here's why. And then we can trust truth to be the referee of that debate. But if there is no truth, and we have given ourselves over to power and someone defining for us what should be commonly held as a value within our community, we will be enslaved to that power group and that power base. That's why I'm against Common Core. We know that Jesus told us, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That slogan has been etched in the library headers of many institutions across our land. But today we're willing to give ourselves over to the comfort, if you will, that comes with commonality rather than the challenges and the insecurity and the discomfort that comes with that dissonance that God places upon our hearts when we allow ourselves to be challenged out of our comfort zone by His truth and to grow and to mature accordingly. I was debating. I'm going to tell you a couple stories and then I'm going to open this up to some Q&A. I was debating a few months ago. I was called down to Tulsa to debate a couple pro-Common Core advocates, both of whom were Republican, by the way. Okay? One of them was the former Speaker of the House for the state of Oklahoma. Good people. People I would probably vote for. People that I enjoy their company, and I think they enjoy mine. I'm not sure at times. I don't think during this debate they necessarily enjoyed it too much. But I got on my bandwagon. I kept beating the drum over and over again. You all know one of the principles of good debate is to get on task and don't get off. Grab a hold, sink your teeth into an issue, and don't let loose of that issue. And I did. I decided that I was going to emphasize local control and local authority, the respect of the teacher, the respect of the superintendent. Why in the world would you hire teachers that aren't smart enough to do their own jobs? You know, I run Oklahoma Wesleyan University, by the way. We're U.S. News and World Report regional best. We're Forbes.com national best. We're recognized by CBS News Money Watch as having the best faculty in the nation 3 successive years in a row. We are an institution that has the highest academic standards and a fine academic reputation, but I don't need somebody to tell me what to teach. And guess what? I don't tell my teachers what to teach. I don't guide their curriculum. I don't tell them how to build a syllabus. I don't tell them what textbooks to choose. I hire good teachers and I release them and I say, you're free to teach within the boundaries of our mission. And our mission is the primacy of Christ, the priority of Scripture, the pursuit of truth, and the practice of wisdom. And as long as you're within that fence, as long as you're within those boundaries, teach, challenge, get people to think, get them to grow, get them to trust the truth. And if all of a sudden I made a mistake and I hired a teacher that's teaching 2 + 2 is 5, you know how I solve the problem? I fire them. There's an easy solution. I don't need you politicians telling me how to fix that problem. And frankly, all of my teachers are trained. They have degrees. They spent years studying their discipline. Isn't it a bit presumptuous for somebody, like I said, off in some distant state, to tell them they don't know enough about their discipline, and here's what we want you to do? That seems awfully intrusive to me. That doesn't seem to smack of academic freedom to me. Anyway, I was on my kick, I was on my soapbox in this debate, and I said, local control is the solution to our educational problem. Because I trust good teachers to teach, and I trust the local community to be able to identify the ideas that they hold dear. And I trust people that are charged to be administrators, such as myself, if you will release them and get out of their way, to hire those good teachers and to be accountable to the local folks in those local communities. Blah, 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 blah. I was on my kick. And after I was done, one of the opponents raised his hand in front of 300 Tea Partiers, I might add. And he said this, and I quote, "Dr. Piper, do you really believe that giving over that type of control to local communities such as Hugo and Sallisaw is a good idea?" Now, if you're from Oklahoma, you know there are a lot of little oil patch towns, probably a lot of them in Texas too. And Hugo and Sallisaw would be a couple of those towns. And what this Republican Speaker of the House of Oklahoma said is, you people in Hugo and Sallisaw are too stupid to teach your own children and to select your own teachers and to hire a good superintendent to provide education for your kids. You're not smart enough. I am. That's what he just said. And as soon as the words left his mouth, I groaned because I thought these people are going to lynch him. There was an audible gasp that went through the room when he said it. And I knew he thought, oh, I can't believe I just said what I was really thinking. And as the room calmed down, I responded to him. And I said, Mr. Smith, the last I knew is that those poor, stupid, homeschooled kids that have been taken under mom's wing and dad's wing in communities like Hugo and Sallisaw and educated accordingly, those poor, stupid kids from those poor, stupid families are performing a lot better on any measure of academic success than the poor souls that are subjected to the crappy education that you provide in Tulsa. And the crowd basically did what you just did, because they recognized. And I wasn't trying to be mean or cruel, but I think sometimes you have to draw attention to a broken idea. And if we really are ready to give our educational establishment over to bureaucrats and politicians and over to government authorities rather than taking the responsibility as parents and as community leaders, if we're really willing to do that, I suggest to you there will be consequences for doing so. And one of the consequences will be you will lose freedom. You will. And one of the consequences will be so will your teachers. They will forfeit their academic freedom. I was in another debate. It was with a superintendent of public schools from Stillwater, Oklahoma, a large community. Again, good person. She has training in education and she was pro-Common Core. I was actually on public television in this debate. I got on my local kick. And I got on my kick about, in addition to local education, local authority, and local control, I got on my kick about academic freedom. And I wouldn't let that go. I wanted to try to drive the point home, which I think everybody on the left should be standing up and applauding what I just said. If I'm talking about giving you academic freedom in the classroom, why wouldn't the left applaud that? Surely they will. Sometimes, sidebar, I think one of the biggest mistakes conservatives make at times is we fail to reclaim the language that's been co-opted by somebody that disagrees with us. We've given over the language and we don't grab it and we don't define it properly and bring it back home. I am proud to say I'm a liberal. I'll define that till the cows come home and I'll win. Because every human being wants liberty and liberation and freedom. So, I was talking about academic freedom. I wouldn't get off that kick with this person that was on OETA TV with me. At the end of the debate, the last words she said before we signed off. Now listen to this. She said, Dr. Piper's wrong. This does not do what he is claiming it will do. It's good education, it's not bad. It's exceptional education, it's not common. He's misusing the words commonality to dumb down the definition of what we're trying to do. And by the way, the state of Oklahoma has already voted on this matter, and we're not going to talk about it anymore. Now, I don't need to say anything. I just won. Do you know why? Because she just showed her cards as to what education will be in the state of Oklahoma from now on. We're not going to talk about ideas that we don't like, because we've decided. So Piper's wrong, and so are you, and we're not talking about it. Nor will your kids, nor will anyone else, because the elites, the power brokers, the Ubermensch, supermen, have decided what ideas are right and what ideas are wrong. That's not good education. That's not classical liberalism. Now, I had one final debate, and then maybe some time for Q&A. I don't want to abuse your time. One of the debates I'm involved in on a daily basis now, because I've decided to speak against Common Core rather than hide in the bushes on the side, is I'm trying to educate and trying to engage, and I'm willing to be proven wrong. If I'm wrong on this, then so be it. But my state representative, who's a good man, good Republican conservative, and my state senator, likewise. Both Christians, both good men, both friends. I've campaigned for them. I've voted for them. They've been they've spoken on my campus. I trust them. But they're wrong on this, because neither one of them understand the consequences. One of them is a corporate guy. He has no experience or training in education. He thinks the solution to bad education in Oklahoma is Common Core. This social leveling of bringing everything into some sort of common standard, and those that were above it get dragged down. And yes, maybe there are a few that were below it that might perform a little bit better, but who's going to decide what this common standard is? And I've asked him over and over again, and I've challenged him over and over again, and here's where we are right now in that debate. My friend, my senator, has said, I'm not letting it out of committee. See, he's the chair of the Education Committee in the state of Oklahoma, and he won't let the discussion out of committee. Now, do you get the common theme here that I'm trying to highlight? John has decided we're not talking about it anymore. I'm not going to let it out of committee, and we're not even going to vote on it, because those of us in the Education Committee in the state of Oklahoma are smarter than you, smarter than Hugo, smarter than Sallisaw, smarter than anyone that disagrees with us. Therefore, we can't even get it out of committee. That's what's wrong with Common Core. Now, you may have come expecting me to get into the weeds and give you all the details on Common Core. But I would argue this, folks. If you can't get the big ideas right, none of the small ideas matter. And the big idea on education is perpetuating big ideas. The big idea of education is to pass on, to inculcate character, integrity. Education should not be about transferring information. And that's another key distinction between the Common Core philosophy and the liberal arts philosophy. The liberal arts philosophy was about passing on integrity, education for integrity, encouraging the next generation of leaders to understand what the self-evident truths that are endowed to us by our Creator really are. It was an education for character. That was the British model. We did not embrace the Germanic model of education until 1876 and the founding of Johns Hopkins, where we finally shifted over to a research university model, and we abandoned the British model because we believed that the research model was better because it would transfer information. Information is important, but information has nothing to do with character integrity, with rightness, with truth, with veritas, with virtue. And if we abandon those big ideas and just teach people information, we're going to have a culture without a soul. And we will not be free. I'm against Common Core because I believe God is the author of freedom. And I think man is always the author of bondage. And I don't want to give myself over to you, quite frankly. I don't. I want to be subject to God and His ideas, in His way, in His truth, and His life. I want to be free to live within those boundaries. I don't want to have somebody else building a fence. Auschwitz had fences. People were not free. And there were ideas. There were ideas that led those people into the bondage of those fences. And we need to be very careful not to give ourselves over to an educational establishment that doesn't recognize the ultimate goal of education. I'm going to read you a couple G.K. Chesterton quotes. And then I'm going to go with some Q&A. The purpose of compulsory education, said Chesterton, and replace the word compulsory with common education, if you will. The purpose of common education, is to deprive the common people of common sense. Most of our educational theories are not as old as the children being taught. Our schools are swept nowadays, and swept with a wave after wave of speculation, by fad after fad of fashion. They defy common sense, and they oppress the common man. The primary task before us is not to educate the uneducated, but to educate the educated. We teach the minor things of commonality, but we ignore the major things of character. What I complain of is a vague popular philosophy which supposes itself to be scientific fact, if you will, when it is really nothing more than a new religion and an uncommonly nasty one. We have put the comforts of a career above the care of the soul. Take away the supernatural, and what remains is the unnatural. Teach to young men enduring truths, and let the learned amuse themselves with passing errors. G.K. Chesterton. C.S. Lewis. Lewis in The Great Divorce tells a story. It's confronting an arrogant young intellectual. And he says this to the arrogant intellectual. Our opinions were not honestly come by. We simply found ourselves in contact with a certain current of ideas. And we plunged into it because it seemed modern and successful. You know, we just started automatically writing the kind of essays that got good marks, and saying the kind of things that won applause. When in all of our lives did we honestly face in solitude the one question on which all turned, whether or not the supernatural might not in fact be true? When did we put up one moment's real resistance to the loss of our faith? I'll read that again and think of commonality. Our opinions were not honestly come by. We simply found ourselves in contact with a certain current of ideas, common ideas, popular ideas, acceptable ideas, common core. And we plunged into it because it seemed modern and successful. Faddish. This would fix the problem. And we will be the smart ones. You know, we just started automatically writing the kind of essays that got good marks and saying the kind of things that won applause. As long as we tested well, it was good, wasn't it? But when in our whole lives did we honestly face, in solitude, the one question that really mattered, and that was, is God real? Is self-evident truth bigger than your commonality in this popular current of educational fad that we all want to jump into because we'll test well at the end of the day, and our kids will get good jobs? When did we put up any resistance to the loss of faith, to the loss of freedom, to the loss of liberty, to the loss of the greatest gift that God has given us? And that's the ability to make choices. Choices to obey Him. Because we understand His truth. I think this is a huge deal, folks. I'm late to the party. But I think we need to take control of the ideas that shape our culture. Because your kids are going to live a very different life, and your grandkids are going to live a very different life if you don't. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I thought you were going to get into the weeds, and I've got guests here from our school, and so I want to protect us from Common Core. But I love what you've done. You've taken it to a new level. But now I'm thinking, this is like drinking from a fire hydrant. How can you help me and all of us in here take what you've given us, even if it's sharing your transcript, so that we can go out from here and defend this position from the very high level that you just presented? Because it is the big idea, but we need to be equipped, not to just go out of here and go, wow, that was really great. But to go out of here with what you just put forward, but this is a lot of information.
Okay.
Can you help me?
First of all, in sensitivity to your time, I want to make sure I'm not going long. How much time do you want me to take in this Q&A session? 10 minutes? Okay. All right. You want me to, was that shut up now so you can get out of here?
Talk on.
Okay. My advice, and I can't wave a magic wand on this. I think it's the advice the church needs to follow. And I'm a Christian. I'm a bold believer in Jesus Christ. I think he's the answer to everything. And if you're not a Christian here, you have to understand the context of what I'm trying to convey. I recognize that many probably are. But I think the mistake that the church makes at times is getting into the weeds rather than staying in the big ideas. We can try to defend minutia and lose every time. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we're doing wrong in politics and in Common Core and educational philosophy today. Maybe by starting with the big idea, and if I can get you to agree that academic freedom is a good thing, if I can get you to agree that liberty is a good thing, if I can get you to agree that you want your kids to be more free rather than less, if I can get you to agree that there are good ideas and bad ideas, if I can get you to agree that we should embrace the good idea and get rid of the bad, if I can get you to agree with that, even if you're way off there in the progressive left, and I would think that even of my progressive left friends, if they're being honest, would agree with much, if not all, of what I just said. Well, if we can agree on those big ideas, then we're halfway home, if not more. Now let's talk about how to get there. But let's make sure that we as believers in good education or believers in Christ, okay, can defend the big idea and don't get distracted by the junk. So my encouragement to all of us as we engage culture, okay, Chuck Colson, I'm a disciple of Chuck Colson. He was very fond of telling people that you keep it simple and stay on task. You define your subject and make sure you defend the big idea robustly and with confidence and with clarity, and I think you are basically halfway home. So I don't know if I'm answering your question other than giving you a little bit of a cheerleading session, and that is figure out what the big idea is. Figure out what the big idea is, and defend it.
Can I still get a transcript?
I'll get you one. I rambled more than I planned on, so it's probably not as tight as, but I'll get you some. Yes, yeah.
Do you put out stats by any chance on your ideas on Common Core?
I have a speech out there. If you want this, that's probably even a little tighter and a little less rabbit trail, just Google Everett Piper Common Core. And I gave a speech. There's a 45-minute version, and there's about a 10-minute version of the I'm Against Common Core Because speech, and it's out there on YouTube. I gave a speech down at the Oklahoma City Rotunda, which was a brief one. I gave a longer speech at a town hall meeting in Edmond, Oklahoma, which is the 35, 40-minute version. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
One thing I just want to say that representatives in Oklahoma don't know what they're up against between you and Jenny White. She's one of my heroes in the movement against Common Core. And my question for you is, 2 weeks ago I was down in Austin at South by Southwest EdU. And when you go through sit through those panel discussions of education experts, if you will, and bringing together technology and education, the big push was for social emotional learning. That's what they actually call it, social emotional learning versus reading, writing, and math. Is that a good way to help define for people the different, if we give our children a traditional foundational education, reading, writing, and math, so that they have a foundation, so that they can go on later to, when they're developmentally ready, to have those big ideas and to have, you know, the ability to critically think, if you will, then they'll have a foundation. What's happening is they're flipping it and making it all emotional, all, you know, the big ideas before our children are ready for them.
So,
Does that make sense?
so your question is, should we allow, should social and emotional education precede 2 + 2 is 4?
Right.
Okay. It's interesting that they're even talking about, because the pitch we get in Oklahoma all the time is that Common Core doesn't have anything to do with values. Common Core doesn't have anything to do with teaching values. We're just going to teach our kids how to perform better in math and sciences. That's it. It doesn't cross over into what you're concerned about, and that is teaching unchristian values to your Christian kids, because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? I mean, when we cut to the chase, that's really what people are concerned about. And so you're saying that they're actually flipping it and saying that we are going to teach the emotional content. We are going to teach the value-laden content. I think you have to go back to the big idea again. And I think that you as a community should have the authority and the control. I think you have the responsibility to define what those big ideas are. We can't, as a Christian community, continue to say, we're in a pluralistic society where everything is equal and we're not going to debate the exceptional nature of Christianity any longer. If we give over that debate, we're going to lose. So I think it's time for us to start debating why freedom exists in the country and why we can champion it. Let me give you an example. I don't know if I'm even answering your question, but here's an example of what goes wrong. And it's a perfect example of what's so easy to correct. I'll pick on the University of Michigan. I think I'm safe here. I won't pick on University of Texas. Okay, University of Michigan. Arguably second only to the University of Texas in being a research university in the land. Now seriously, the University of Michigan in its 2001 course catalog has a course entitled The Ethics of Corporate Management. Say it again. University of Michigan, course catalog 2001, Ethics of Corporate Management. Okay? I don't know if you remember this or not. Okay? The course description says this. This course does not deal with the personal moral issues of truthfulness and honesty. I'm serious. Okay, I'll say that again. Ethics of Corporate Management, U of M course description. This course does not deal with the personal moral issues of truthfulness and honesty, unquote. And then they go on to say this. It is assumed that all the students enrolling in this course have already drawn their own conclusions on these matters. Now, did you ever stop and think that maybe those accountants and those attorneys that left the University of Michigan and worked for Enron and WorldCom and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, etc., didn't know how to tell the truth because U of M told them it didn't matter? Did you ever stop and think that there were consequences to lousy ideas and lousy education? Did the University of Michigan ever stop and think that if you're going to teach ethics in corporate management, you might want to define what your ethical foundation and assumptions are? Now, I don't know if that answered your question, but I think what that does emphasize is the importance of us reclaiming the high ground of ethics and defining it with confidence. Okay? I don't know, again, I'm trying to honor your time. Do you want me to take another question? You want me to shut up? Okay? Yes, sir.
I'll tell you where the metal hits the rubber.
Okay.
It's where you have a couple of bright kids like my wife and myself, and we've got the college counselor. The counselor is saying, you can go to the University of Michigan, and you can. And if you go to the University of Michigan, you will go to Wall Street. Whereas, if I said, I'm not going to go to the University of Michigan, I'm going to go to Hillsdale College.
Or Oklahoma Wesleyan University.
Or Oklahoma Wesleyan University. See, I've just violated that college, that high school counselor. She earns brownie points. if she gets me to Michigan, and she doesn't, if I go to Hillsdale or Oklahoma, what's my mistake?
Let me summarize with what I started with. Ideas matter. Richard Weaver, 1947, seminal work. The title was Ideas Have Consequences. It's a very simple idea. Basically, he was saying that ideas are always directional, they always lead somewhere. Nothing irritates me more than you people sending your kids to colleges and universities after you've spent 18 years training up your sons and daughters in the way they should go so that when they are old they will not depart. You take them off to school X, Y, or Z, and you drop them off on campus, and it doesn't take that campus 18 minutes to start ripping their soul out. And I'm not exaggerating. This is my industry. This is my business. I know what I'm talking about. The college and university system today takes great pride in tearing down faith. When you and I were in college, you may have been treated as a prude or a cute little Christian, and they may have tolerated you because you could be trusted. Or you would be the designated driver because you weren't going to party. Those days of being tolerated and frankly appreciated for our morality and for our prudishness are gone. They relish the opportunity to take your kid's soul and destroy it. And we need to start recognizing that if you want your kids to lead godly lives and to lead good culture, that you've got to send them to institutions that teach that, not teach the opposite. Now, this may be a shameless self-promotion, but guys, it does matter where you send your kids. 75% of your kids that are churched, by the time they're juniors in college, are agnostic. 75%. Now, you all may think you're going to beat the odds. I'm not sure. I would strongly recommend a Christian college that believes in the big ideas and doesn't apologize for them. And I also would strongly encourage you to pay attention to programs like Summit Ministry, which is a 2-week boot camp for biblical worldview for high school and for college kids, or Worldview Academy, which is a 1-week boot camp for 14 to 17-year-olds. You have to teach the good ideas, and you can't trust it. You can't, I really don't believe you can trust that you've done a good enough job that they're going to be able to weather the storm in the secular academy today. Yes, one more, and then I need to honor your time.
Okay, and this is Common Core, but not Common Core. As you know, David Coleman, who's one of the architects of Common Core, and who is now the president of the College Board, has just changed the SAT. Of course, since Common Core was dumbed down, they were not going to pass the SAT.
So they
now
dumbed
the
down.
SAT has been dumbed down. My question to you is, what are you going to do about admitting students? Are you using any of those tests, or are you using high school?
What do we do? The question is, what is Oklahoma Wesleyan going to do? What am I going to do as a college educator in terms of admission standards? Well, first of all, I'm not ever going to trust somebody else's definition of excellence. So we've got multiple measures at Oklahoma Wesleyan, which most colleges do. We take high school GPA, we take rank in class, and we take SAT or ACT scores. When we take those three to consider whether or not, and score them accordingly. Now, are any of those measures perfect? No, because you've got grade inflation in high school, so you could graduate with a 3.5 GPA, but if the school is guilty of grade inflation, that GPA is relatively meaningless. The SAT and the ACT are being dumbed down, i.e., there's this equity that's being imposed by Common Core philosophy even before we knew about Common Core. And then, of course, class rank is not perfect either. So I, as an educator, am going to look at all those things, but then I'm going to make a decision over and above that. I would rather have a kid that knows what's right and wrong, and that it's wrong to lie, and it's right to tell the truth. Even though he may have lesser scores, I'm going to admit that person before I'm going to admit somebody with a 29 ACT who can't tell me that it's wrong to lie to Enron. Okay? So integrity means a lot to me. It means a lot to me. And I think there are other colleges that are going to be making similar decisions. I'm still getting hands. I don't know whether you want me to honor that or whether you want me to close. Okay, one more.
I'm curious as to the practice of admissions into colleges, whether you see a trend toward colleges doing like a lot of private schools where they test the child before they admit the child, and that there is some leaning toward the distrust of SAT scores already in college admissions. Do you see colleges administering their own admissions test to determine the child's ability to function in math and science and these things that they need to address?
Yeah, some colleges are doing that already with their own faculty because they recognize that those measures that I just shared with you, high school GPA, ACT, SAT, or school or class rank, is really not the end-all and be-all of academic success or predicting academic success.
Do you have any information about how the AP scores or the AP curriculum on a secondary level, which you may not know, but some universities still accept AP scores for the class
Yes.
time, that sort of thing? Have you seen a shift in that?
I haven't seen a shift. I know that AP is something that is still honored, it's still used very robustly in Oklahoma. I'm actually not a fan of AP because I think you can get concurrent college credit rather than AP, and I think it's better for you. For example, a high school kid at Oklahoma that lives in Bartlesville can enroll concurrently in his or her senior year and get college credit at the same time they're fulfilling the requirements for high school graduation. Why wouldn't they want that rather than an AP class? So I'm not a huge fan of AP. I would find a local college and maybe see if there's a concurrent program. I think it's better than AP personally, because then you're transferring in 15, 20, 30 hours of college credit during your freshman year. Saves you a lot of money too. I think I need to allow you guys to get out of here and go home. Thank you.